So I'm curious, Thomas, Khaliya, when you guys are going through the process of deciding what you're going to essentially intervene in, what does that look like?
Well, I think we're opportunists in the sense that we have certain skill sets, certain networks, and a certain geography that gives us access to, let's say, the inventor stage on a lot of different technologies and disruptions. And so I come from design and technology as a background, and I've been interested in sort of looking at how do you facilitate disruptions that are people-centered. And so the projects that we pick, and I'll speak for myself, but I think it's the same for Khaliya, most of the projects we do, we're both involved in some capacity, they are, they look for a similar profile, which is, there's a need, a human need, that's not being addressed by the current technology and business landscape. And so we need to find a corrective measure that perhaps has a social enterprise component. It may have a philanthropic debut, but then it should kind of find its own financial sustainability over time, because that need is a market. So we're trying to be, as I said, opportunist about our ability to identify those white spaces. And generally speaking, there's a physiognomy of project that's more or less the same. And I would also say that typically speaking, they're kind of growths or emanations of prior projects. So for example, when I started Clear Village, I identified the need for third spaces for communities. It was before the co-working trend had started. So I set up a co-working space because I saw that it's great to do co-creation projects for neighborhoods, but you need to keep the momentum. You need a place where people can meet. Churches are not where people meet anymore. Restaurants, are commercial. So we need a non-commercial environment for people to create the relationships that define communities. And so that's what co-working spaces should be. It's not what they are now, unfortunately, but it's what I tried to do. And from there, I saw that technology education was a real deficit. We're transitioning millions of people, and actually billions, into the fourth industrial revolution age. And we're not equipped. Less than 1 in 4 people actually is currently equipped to really understand and take advantage of the new technologies that are coming online. So, if we're afraid of automation, should we be is a different question, but we should be afraid of not being equipped to take advantage of it. So, these are all, they come as segues, if you want, where we see an opportunity and we try to intervene in that space and find a way for ourselves to be useful. And that's the way I perceive it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we look at problems that are hard to solve, where we don't feel like there is a good solution out there yet, and figure out who's looking at it and are they looking at it in the right way. And if they are, then we'll get involved. I mean, it's also involved in our deep passions. He's an architect. He's a futurist, so the future of work, the future of buildings, the future of communities and space, that's what he's looking at the most. I'm really looking at the future of mental health for no other reason than it is the seed of everything. It's how we interact with each other as humans that defines where we go forward and how we end up, and if we have satisfying, happy lives or not, or if we destroy each other, whether we create communities of support and love, or whether we create communities of hostility. And I think that is something that needs to be intentional. And with what he's building, he's creating that space for it. As a public health specialist, I've really been looking at it as almost a social contagion kind of metaphor, which is that if we have deeply unhappy people in our midst, the likelihood is that's going to impact those around him. It's going to create an environment that's not necessarily going to be as healthy and happy as it should be. And so looking at the mental health equation is really integral. Right now we have a crisis of mental health. We have 1 in 5 people that's depressed. We have people that are doing mass atrocities against children and in public places. And where is this coming from, and how do we stop it? That's where I feel like we are failing as people, when we let people get so deeply unhappy that they need to destroy life to feel like their lives are meaningful. that's a deep problem that we have to look at. And to really solve that problem, we need to create these communities, we need to create safety, and we need to create incentives for people to want to be better people, for people to want to connect with each other again. We have a crisis of connection too. And that's where I think, faith, public spaces, being involved in things that matter, really pull people together.
Yeah, the overlap in the way that we look at it, if you want, is that, she just mentioned, the focus on communities. It's a sort of systemic perception of well-being that we're failing to currently address because we've fragmented the way we look at the problem. And so it's a more holistic perception if you can both tackle, let's say, the internal dynamics of community and the external environmental dynamics of community, then the kind of social cohesion factor should, whether you're analog or digital, should repair some of those ills. So we think that the sort of, if you want to take a James Lovelock kind of perception of Gaia, we're disrespecting the things that make us good human beings, and we're looking at some of the stressors and trying to reduce the volume of those little by little, and then overall maybe it becomes music again, and communities can come together and they can actually have the meals together, and those moments of togetherness that shape, I would say, the social capital and the well-being capital. I think this is what we're about.